The standard Oklahoma real estate contract requires buyers to give sellers a copy of all written inspection reports. And that's true even if the buyer intends to terminate the contract because of the inspection results. But I was asked recently, what if we're representing the seller and we don't want a copy of the inspection results because we'd rather not know what's in them? Well, stick around to find out why I think that may not be the wisest decision that you can make.
Hey, R Pro.
Hey, R Pro. Hey, R Pro.
Hey, R Pro.
Hey, R Pro, I have a question. Hey, R Pro, I have a question. I'm Jillian Gardner with ERA Courtyard, and basically the question is, if you are in the inspection period and the buyer has an inspection done on the property and they decide they don't want to move forward, and maybe you're on the listing side or the sellers are your client, do you have to accept the inspection report? Do you have to actually receive it? Can you say, you know what, we don't want to see the inspection report, don't send it to us? Because I have been asked by the other agent, hey, do you want me to send it? Because we're not moving forward, so I don't have to send it to you if you don't want to know.
Now, we all know that both you and the seller can be held liable for defects that aren't disclosed to the buyer. But what does the law actually require for the buyer to prove? Well, they have to prove that you have actual knowledge of the defect and you failed to disclose it. So the theory here is if there's an inspection report that reveals some kind of new defect we didn't know about, and if we choose not to get a copy of that defect, well, then we don't have actual knowledge and we can't be held liable for it. So that may be true that you wouldn't have actual knowledge, but let's consider the possible outcomes here if you decide to go that route. The first scenario is that a new buyer comes along, you enter into a new contract, and it's a pretty good chance that their inspector is going to find whatever the issue is. And so what will happen? Well, if it busted the first deal, there's probably a pretty good chance that it might bust the second deal as well. So perhaps in that scenario, would it have been better to go ahead and find out whatever the defect was, disclose it up front, so when that second buyer comes along, they're aware of the defect, so it won't come as a surprise during the inspection period, and it's less likely to bust that second deal because that can all be negotiated in with that knowledge up front. So in that scenario, maybe it would be better to just go ahead and find it out and disclose it. That way, you're preventing a second deal from busting. The second possible scenario, though, is a new buyer comes along and let's say there was a defect, but their inspector doesn't find it out. So what happens now? Well, they go ahead and go to closing, they move in, and at some point this new defect reveals itself, and it is a major problem. So they're upset because they think there's no way that the seller didn't know about this, so they're going to sue. And the first thing is, who are they going to sue? Well, I can tell you there's a pretty good chance that they're going to sue not just the seller, but they're going to sue you too. So let's say they actually sue you. What do they have to prove? Well, again, they have to prove actual knowledge. And your defense in that case is going to be, well, look, I didn't have actual knowledge of any defects. But here's what that buyer can prove. They can prove that there was a prior transaction, they can prove that it was inspected, and they can prove there was an inspection report that revealed whatever that defect was. Now that's going to start to look like you did have actual knowledge. Now, your defense is going to have to be, well, we chose to not look at that inspection report. We chose to not take a copy of it, even though the buyer is required to give that seller a copy of it. And so your defense starts to look a little sketchy, I think. Now, I'm not saying you're going to lose this case, because perhaps your argument that you don't have actual knowledge is a good one. But on the other hand, you're having to hang your defense on being willfully ignorant from an inspection report that you were supposed to get a copy of. And I would hate for the court to look at that as being reckless or fraudulent in some way when we knew that we should have had a copy of this, we should have had that information, and we chose to be willfully ignorant. Could that still arise to the level of actual knowledge where a court might find you liable? It's possible, and I sure wouldn't want to be the test case on that. At a minimum, you are more likely to walk yourself into a lawsuit by not getting the inspection report and disclosing it. And you're probably not going to look real good in the process because now you're getting sued over not disclosing something that really had things been done correctly, should have been disclosed. And that's probably not a position you want to put yourself in when the alternative is you go ahead and get a copy of that inspection report, you disclose whatever needs to be disclosed, and now you're not going to get sued over it because it was properly disclosed. So while maybe nothing will happen, and perhaps you don't get sued, and if you do, you win, but in my opinion, the alternative is to go ahead and get a copy of that inspection report, disclose what needs to be disclosed, and avoid having to defend a lawsuit or sit around for 2 years waiting to see if one gets filed. You're better off just going ahead and disclosing it and addressing it up front, in my opinion. Hey, I want to take a second here real quick and tell you about a new product that we have that might just make your life a little bit easier. I don't know how much time you spend talking to your buyers and sellers about the contract and explaining it to them, but it's a whole lot harder these days in an era of electronic signatures and doing business via email. But nevertheless, it's still really important for you to explain that contract to your buyers and sellers. Well, we've created something that makes that a lot easier on you. You can get the RPro Academy contract explainer videos and let us do the contract explanation for you. They're 15-minute videos you can send to your buyer or your seller, and it is me walking them through the contract in a way that makes you look like the expert. It's not branded for us, so it looks like something that you've had created to help you do your job. And we want to make sure that we're explaining that contract to the buyers and sellers and help you in that process. So go on over to rpro.academy/store to check out our contract explainer videos. So thank you so much for the question. We love to address these kinds of serious issues that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and we've got lots more coming. So please make sure you have liked this video and subscribe to us so that you know when the next Hey RPro video comes out with an answer to another one of your questions, which will be coming very soon.